Congratulations, Serenity. You've just become a married woman. The words echoed through the law office like thunder in a clear sky, and Serenity Johnson nearly dropped the coffee cup she held with trembling hands. Her green eyes widened as she stared at the document she had signed seconds before, the fine print dancing before her vision blurred by shock. "Excuse me?" Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. I thought this was just an employment contract." The lawyer, a fat man with thick glasses and an oily smile, straightened the papers with evident satisfaction. "Ah, my dear, you signed a matrimonial contract. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for exactly 30 days as Mrs. Maverick Stone's wife. The terms are quite clear." Serenity felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. 26 years old, unemployed for 3 months with overdue rent and an empty refrigerator, she had clung to this opportunity like a shipwrecked person clinging to a plank. Being a businessman's personal assistant, they had said. Great salary, they promised. Just 30 days, they guaranteed. But marriage? That definitely wasn't in the newspaper ad. No, no, no. She stood up so abruptly that the chair almost toppled over. "I would never agree to this. There must be a mistake." "I'm afraid not, miss." "Forgive me, Mrs. Stone." The lawyer pointed to her flowery signature at the bottom of the page. "You signed here, here, and here. The contract is valid and irrevocable." Serenity's legs buckled. How had she been so naive, so desperate? She had barely read the document, trusting the quick explanation they gave her at the reception. She needed that money to save Grandma Eleanor's apartment, the only home she had known since she was 7. "What if I refuse to comply?" she asked, still clinging to a thread of hope. "Clause 15b. He flipped through the pages with sadistic pleasure. "If either party withdraws from the agreement, they must pay a fine of $500,000, plus all legal costs." The world spun. $500,000? She didn't even have $500 in the bank. Serenity collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands. How had she reached this point? Literature graduate with honors, dedicated ex-teacher until the school closed due to lack of funds, and now a contract wife to a man she didn't even know. "Where?" Her voice failed. "Where is he?" "Mr. Stone awaits you at home. The driver is outside." At home. The word sounded strange and frightening. Serenity grabbed her worn purse and headed to the door on wobbly legs, feeling like a condemned woman marching to the scaffold. The driver, a burly man in a dark suit, led her in sepulchral silence through a black limousine that looked like a coffin on wheels. As the city paraded past the window, Serenity tried to imagine her new husband. Probably a cranky, controlling old man, one of those who collect wives like trophies. Or maybe a spoiled, cruel young man who enjoyed humiliating less fortunate people. The mansion that appeared after 40 minutes of travel took her breath away. It was a white stone palace with impeccable gardens and a central fountain that spouted crystal water. Serenity swallowed hard. She definitely wasn't in Kansas anymore. The butler who opened the door was a distinguished gentleman with graying hair and a gentle expression. "Mrs. Stone, I presume. I'm Fergus. Welcome." Thank you." It was surreal to be called by that name. "The master awaits you in the study." Serenity followed Fergus through corridors adorned with paintings that probably cost more than her annual teacher's salary. Her worn sneakers made noise against the marble floor, echoing her inadequacy with each step. Fergus stopped before 2 massive oak doors. "May I offer advice, madam? The master seems rough on the outside, but he has a good heart. Just be prepared." Prepared for what? Serenity wanted to ask, but the doors were already opening. The study was immense, with bookshelves filled from floor to ceiling, and a crackling fireplace that created dancing shadows on the walls. Behind a mahogany desk, with his back to her, stood a tall and imposing masculine silhouette, black hair slightly disheveled over a strong neck. "So," the voice was deep, velvety, with a touch of accent she couldn't identify. "You're the brave one who sold herself for 30 days. Serenity felt her blood boil. "I didn't sell myself, I was deceived." He laughed, a low sound without humor. "Of course. Everyone always is. Finally, Maverick Stone turned around, and Serenity's world stopped spinning. He couldn't be more than 35 years old. Strong jaw, well-drawn lips, lightly tanned skin. But it was his eyes that paralyzed her. Blue like the sea in a storm, intense and disturbing. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous air. He was, without a shadow of doubt, the most devastatingly attractive man she had ever seen. And also the coldest, judging by the glacial expression on his perfect face. Disappointed? He approached with predatory steps, and Serenity noticed he limped slightly with his right leg. Were you expecting someone older and grotesque to justify your decision? She swallowed hard, trying not to notice how the tailored suit molded his athletic body. Why did you do this? Why did you need a contract wife? Maverick stopped a meter from her, close enough for her to smell his expensive masculine cologne. That's none of your business. You're here to play a role, nothing more. What role? The perfect wife. Obedient, silent, and invisible when necessary. He walked around her like a predator evaluating its prey. Don't worry, I won't touch you. I have standards. The barb hit home and Serenity felt her cheeks burn. She looked down at her faded jeans and simple blouse, mentally comparing herself to the stunning socialites who surely populated his world. Great, she retorted, lifting her chin with wounded pride. I have standards too. For a fraction of a second, something flashed in his stormy eyes. Surprise? Amusement? But it disappeared so quickly she thought she imagined it. Fergus will show you to your quarters. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late. He returned to his desk, ignoring her completely. Serenity was being dismissed like a servant. Humiliation burned in her throat, but she forced herself to leave with dignity. When the doors closed behind her, she didn't see Maverick Stone raise his eyes from the document he pretended to read, nor the conflict that stormed in his gaze as he watched her leave. 30 days. How would she survive this? And why, despite everything, was her heart still beating fast because of those impossible blue eyes? The guest suite was larger than Serenity's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. A 4-poster bed dominated the center with silk curtains in deep emerald, and an antique vanity held fresh white roses that perfumed the air with their delicate scent. Your belongings arrived an hour ago, Fergus informed her, gesturing to 3 designer suitcases she'd never seen before. Mr. Stone took the liberty of updating your wardrobe. Serenity's cheeks flamed. He bought me clothes? Without asking? The master is thorough in his preparations. Fergus's diplomatic tone suggested this wasn't unusual behavior. Dinner attire has been selected. May I suggest you rest? You look rather pale. After Fergus left, Serenity sank onto the velvet armchair by the window. Through the glass, she could see Maverick in the gardens below, his powerful frame moving with controlled grace despite his slight limp. Even from this distance, he commanded attention, a dark prince in his castle. What am I doing here? She opened the first suitcase and gasped. Silk blouses, cashmere sweaters, designer dresses with price tags that made her stomach lurch. Everything in her exact size, from intimate apparel to evening gowns. The man was either very observant or had investigated her thoroughly. Both possibilities unsettled her. At exactly 7:45, she stood before her mirror in a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves like liquid silk. The woman staring back looked like a stranger, elegant, sophisticated, expensive. But her green eyes still held the same uncertainty, the same fear of the unknown. Just 30 days, she reminded herself. You can survive anything for 30 days. The dining room could seat 20, but only 2 places were set at one end of the mahogany table. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's light like trapped stars, and the aroma of roasted herbs made her empty stomach growl embarrassingly. Maverick was already seated, changed into a charcoal gray sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. He looked up from his wine glass as she approached, and something flickered across his features. Approval? Surprise? It vanished too quickly to tell. Punctual, good. He gestured to the chair across from him. I detest tardiness. A uniformed server appeared, placing salmon with lemon butter before her. Serenity had never seen food so artfully arranged, like edible sculpture. Eat, Maverick commanded when she hesitated. You're too thin. Excuse me? The fork clattered against her plate. I'm perfectly healthy, thank you very much. Are you? His blue eyes assessed her coolly. When did you last have a proper meal? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Between job hunting and rationing her dwindling savings, she'd survived mainly on ramen and pride for weeks. But she'd die before admitting that to him. That's none of your business. Everything about you is my business now. We need to establish rules. Rules. Of course. Serenity set down her fork, appetite vanishing. I'm listening. First, you will accompany me to all social functions as my devoted wife. Smile, nod, speak only when spoken to. Second, you will not discuss our arrangement with anyone. The story is that we met, fell madly in love, and married in a whirlwind romance. How romantic, she muttered. His lips twitched slightly. Third, you will not enter my private study or bedroom without permission. Fourth, no media interviews, no social media posts, no photographs without my approval. Am I allowed to breathe without asking? This time his almost smile was unmistakable. Smart mouth will get you in trouble, Mrs. Stone. It already has, apparently. She took a defiant bite of salmon, surprised by its delicate flavor. What happens after 30 days? You disappear. New identity, new city, new life. The settlement will ensure you never want for anything again. Something cold settled in her chest. He spoke of her future disappearance so casually, as if she were merely a temporary inconvenience to be disposed of. Why 30 days? Why not hire an actress for whatever performance you need? Maverick's expression shuddered completely. That's not your concern. Actually, it is. I'm the one stuck in this bizarre arrangement. I deserve to know why my life has been turned upside down for your convenience. He set down his glass with controlled precision. Your life was already upside down. I simply offered a solution. The words stung because they were true, but Serenity refused to be cowed. A solution that benefits you far more than me. What are you hiding, Maverick Stone? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes at her use of his first name. He rose abruptly, moving to the windows that overlooked the moonlit gardens. You ask too many questions, and you give too few answers. She stood as well, the silk dress whispering against her legs. If we're going to convince people we're madly in love, shouldn't I know something about my supposed husband? Love. He turned the word over like it tasted bitter. Is that what you believe in, Serenity Johnson? Fairy tale endings and happily ever after? Her name on his lips sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. I believe people deserve honesty. I believe in treating others with respect. I believe in fantasies. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. Let me educate you about reality. Love is a weakness. Marriage is a business transaction, and fairy tales are lies we tell children to help them sleep. How sad for you, she whispered, meeting his intense gaze without flinching. To live in a world so cold and empty. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped. She glimpsed something raw and vulnerable in those storm-blue eyes. Loneliness, perhaps, or pain so deep it had fossilized into cynicism. But then the walls slammed back into place. The only thing sad is naive optimism in the face of harsh reality. He stepped back, creating distance between them. Fergus will provide your schedule tomorrow. We have appearances to maintain. He strode toward the door, then paused without turning around. The dress suits you. Keep it. And then he was gone, leaving Serenity alone with the lingering scent of his cologne and the echo of unexpected compliment. She touched the silk fabric, her mind reeling. Beneath his Arctic exterior, she'd glimpsed something that intrigued her far more than his devastating good looks. Complexity. Maverick Stone wasn't just cruel. He was wounded. And wounded things, she knew from experience, lashed out to protect themselves. What happened to you, she wondered, staring at the empty doorway. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to streak the windows. Somewhere in this vast mansion, her temporary husband was probably congratulating himself on successfully intimidating his contract bride. But Serenity Johnson had survived worse storms than Maverick Stone's icy demeanor, and despite his warnings about fairy tales, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just glimpsed a dragon guarding something precious, something worth fighting for. 29 days to go. Serenity woke to the sound of shouting. Disoriented in the luxurious surroundings, she fumbled for her phone. 3:17 a.m. The voices were coming from somewhere below. One unmistakably Maverick's, deep and furious. The other she didn't recognize. Told you never to contact me here. You can't hide forever, Mav. She deserves to know the truth. The truth? Maverick's laugh was bitter, broken. The truth is that I destroyed everything I touched. She's better off believing I'm dead. Serenity crept to her door, heart pounding. Who was he talking about? And why did he sound so shattered? This isn't living, it's existing. You think punishing yourself will bring her back? Enough! Something crashed. Glass, maybe. Get out. Now. Footsteps echoed in the hallway below, then the slam of the front door. Silence settled over the mansion like a shroud, broken only by Serenity's shallow breathing. She should go back to bed. Pretend she heard nothing. But the raw pain in Maverick's voice haunted her. Against her better judgment, she slipped into the hallway. The house felt different in darkness, less palatial, more like a beautiful prison. Following her instincts, she found herself outside the study where they'd first met. Light spilled from beneath the door. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. This isn't your business, her rational mind warned. He made that very clear. But her heart whispered something else entirely. She knocked softly. Maverick? Silence. I know you're in there. I heard... Are you okay? The door flew open so suddenly she jumped. Maverick stood before her in rumpled dress pants and an untucked shirt, his hair disheveled, eyes wild with something between rage and despair. A cut on his knuckle told the story of whatever he'd thrown. I told you never to enter my study without permission. I'm not in your study. I'm outside it. Her voice was steady, despite her racing pulse. And you're bleeding. He glanced at his hand dismissively. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Before he could protest, she grasped his wrist, examining the cut. His skin was warm, the pulse beneath her fingers rapid and strong. This needs cleaning. Don't. But he didn't pull away. Let me help. Their eyes met, and she saw it again. That glimpse of vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. Please. Something in her tone must have reached him, because his shoulders sagged slightly. The kitchen. First aid kit is in the pantry. The massive kitchen was a study in marble and stainless steel. Serenity found the well-stocked medical kit and guided Maverick to sit at the breakfast bar. Under the soft pendant lighting, he looked younger, less intimidating. The perfect mask had slipped, revealing the man beneath. This might sting, she murmured, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. He didn't flinch, watching her face intently as she worked. Why are you doing this? Because you're hurt. She focused on wrapping the bandage, hyper-aware of his proximity. Who was that man? Maverick went rigid. No one important. He called you Mav. He seemed to know you very well. She tied off the bandage but didn't release his hand. He mentioned someone. A woman who thinks you're dead? Drop it, Serenity. Why do you punish yourself? What happened? I said drop it. He yanked his hand away, standing so abruptly the stool scraped against marble. This is exactly why I don't need concern or sympathy. I don't need someone digging into my life asking questions I won't answer. Everyone needs someone who cares. Not me. But his voice lacked conviction. Serenity stood as well, moving closer despite his obvious desire to retreat. What are you so afraid of? That someone might see you're human? That underneath all this coldness, you actually feel things? You don't know what you're talking about. don't I? You're in pain, Maverick. Real pain. And instead of dealing with it, you've built these walls so high you can't even see the sky anymore. The walls keep me safe. No, she said softly. They keep you alone. There's a difference. For a moment, he stared at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. Then his expression hardened. You think you understand me after 2 days? You think your amateur psychology can crack me open like some romance novel hero waiting to be saved? The mockery in his voice stung, but Serenity held her ground. I think you're scared. I think you've convinced yourself that feeling nothing is better than risking everything. But that's not living. That's just surviving. Surviving is all I deserve. The words slipped out before he could stop them, raw and honest and devastating. They stared at each other in the sudden silence, the weight of his confession hanging between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Why? She whispered. Maverick turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. Because I killed someone. The world tilted. What? Not directly. But my choices, my arrogance, my inability to see beyond my own desires, it destroyed the most important person in my life. His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. So no, Serenity Johnson, I don't deserve salvation or happy endings or whatever fairy tale you think you can weave around me. I deserve exactly what I have. Nothing. Her heart broke for him, this wounded man who carried guilt like armor. Maverick, go back to bed. He didn't turn around. Pretend this conversation never happened. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Pretending? The unfair accusation hit its mark, but instead of retreating, Serenity moved closer. I'm not pretending to care. You should be. Finally, he faced her, and the anguish in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. Caring about me is dangerous. Ask anyone who's tried. Maybe I'm braver than you think. Or more foolish. She smiled sadly. Probably both. For one impossible moment, she thought he might reach for her. His hand lifted slightly, fingers almost grazing her cheek, before he caught himself. Go to bed, Serenity. Before I do something we'll both regret. The warning was clear, but so was the longing beneath it. She nodded, backing toward the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I don't believe you're beyond saving, and I don't think the person you lost would want you living like this. She left him standing in the kitchen, surrounded by shadows and ghosts she couldn't see but whose presence she felt as surely as her own heartbeat. Back in her room, Serenity pressed her back against the closed door, hands trembling. In 3 days, she'd seen more of Maverick Stone than he probably showed the world in 3 years, and what she'd seen terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. He was broken, yes, haunted, convinced of his own damnation, but he was also worth fighting for. And God help her, she was starting to fall. Smile, darling. The cameras are watching. Maverick's arm wrapped possessively around Serenity's waist as they stepped from the limousine onto the red carpet. The charity gala blazed with flashbulbs and designer gowns. Manhattan's elite gathered like beautiful predators in their natural habitat. Serenity's emerald silk gown, another of Maverick's selections, flowed around her like liquid starlight. A family heirloom necklace of diamonds and emeralds graced her throat, cold and heavy against her skin. She felt like she was wearing someone else's life. Remember, Maverick murmured against her ear, his breath sending unwelcome shivers down her spine. We're madly in love. Try to look like you can tolerate me. That's asking a lot, she whispered back, forcing a radiant smile for the photographers. His low chuckle vibrated through his chest. There's my sharp-tongued wife. Wife. Even as pretense, the word did dangerous things to her heartbeat. 3 days had passed since their kitchen encounter, 3 days of polite distance and carefully constructed walls. But the memory of his confession lingered between them like smoke. Maverick Stone. There you are, you mysterious devil. A woman in scarlet approached with predatory grace. Victoria Ashworth, if Serenity remembered correctly from her crash course in New York society. All platinum hair and surgical precision, she air-kissed Maverick with territorial familiarity. Victoria. His tone was politely neutral, but Serenity felt the tension in his frame. And this must be the little nobody who stole Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp as she assessed Serenity from head to toe. How quaint. Serenity Stone. Serenity extended her hand with practiced grace, channeling every etiquette lesson from her grandmother's dinner table. And you must be Victoria Ashworth. Maverick has told me absolutely nothing about you. Victoria's eyes flashed with annoyance while Maverick's lips twitched suspiciously. How refreshing. Most women in your position would be threatened by Maverick's history. Should I be? Serenity looked up at her husband with doe eyes full of adoration. Darling, should I be jealous of your past associations? Maverick's response was swift and devastating. His hand cupped her face gently, thumb brushing her cheekbone as he gazed down at her with such tender intensity that her breath caught. The only thing you should worry about, his voice was honey over steel, is how thoroughly you've ruined me for anyone else. Then he kissed her. It was meant to be for show, a performance for Victoria's benefit and the discreet photographers. But the moment Maverick's lips touched hers, the world disappeared. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, then deeper as her lips parted involuntarily. His hand tangled in her hair and she forgot to breathe, forgot to think, forgot everything except the impossible perfection of this moment. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. The heat in Maverick's eyes wasn't entirely fabricated, and from the stunned expression on his face, he'd felt it too. That electric connection that made the artificial real. Well? Victoria's voice cut through the spell like broken glass. Aren't you two just precious? She stalked away, defeated, leaving them standing in the middle of the glittering crowd. Serenity's lips still tingled from the kiss, her heart racing like a wild thing in her chest. Good performance, Maverick said quietly, but his voice lacked its usual coldness. Yes? She touched her lips unconsciously. Very convincing. They both knew it was a lie. The evening progressed in a whirlwind of introductions, champagne toasts, and carefully orchestrated conversations. Serenity found herself surprisingly adept at playing the role of devoted wife, perhaps because parts of it weren't entirely acting. The way Maverick's hand settled naturally at the small of her back. How he unconsciously leaned toward her when she spoke. The protective way he deflected inappropriate questions about their whirlwind romance. You're a natural, he murmured during a lull in the social battlefield. At lying? Thanks, I think. At this? He gestured around them. Most people spend years learning to navigate these waters. You're swimming like you were born to it. Fake it until you make it, she said lightly, but his compliment warmed her more than it should. Serenity Stone? They turned to find a distinguished older man with kind eyes and silver hair approaching. Something flickered across Maverick's face. Surprise, alarm. Judge Harrison. Maverick's voice was carefully controlled. I didn't expect to see you here. Maverick. The judge's tone was neutral, but his eyes held questions. I had to see for myself. After what happened with Isabella, don't. Maverick's interruption was sharp enough to cut glass. Isabella. The name hit Serenity like a physical blow. This was connected to his confession, the woman he'd mentioned in pain and guilt. Judge Harrison studied Maverick's face, then looked at Serenity with grandfatherly concern. My dear, I hope you know what you're getting into. I know my husband, Serenity heard herself say, and I know he's not the man people think he is. The judge raised an eyebrow at her fierce defense. Perhaps not. Perhaps people can change. He turned to Maverick. Isabella would want you to be happy, son. She wouldn't want you carrying this guilt forever. Maverick went rigid beside her. You don't know what she'd want. I know she loved you enough to forgive anything. Even this. The judge touched Maverick's shoulder gently. Let yourself live again. For her memory, if not for yourself. He walked away, leaving them standing in stunned silence. Serenity could feel Maverick withdrawing, walls slamming back into place. Who was Isabella? She asked softly. No one. but his voice broke slightly on the words. Maverick, we're leaving. He was already guiding her toward the exit, his grip firm but careful. Now. The ride home was silent, tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. Serenity watched Maverick's profile in the darkness, memorizing the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched on his thighs. Back at the mansion, he started to retreat to his study as always, but she caught his arm. Talk to me. There's nothing to say. There's everything to say. Who was she, Maverick? Who was Isabella? He turned, and the anguish in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. She was my fiancée. She was going to be my wife. She was the best person I've ever known, and she's dead because of me. The confession hung between them like a chasm. Serenity's heart broke for him, for the love he'd lost, for the guilt that was eating him alive. How? She whispered. Does it matter? She's gone. I destroyed the only good thing in my life, and I deserve to live with that knowledge every single day. No. Serenity stepped closer, her hand still on his arm. No one deserves to live like that. What happened? For a moment she thought he might tell her. His mask slipped, revealing the broken man underneath. But then he pulled away, retreating into his fortress of solitude. This is what I meant about getting too close, he said quietly. About caring. It only leads to pain. He left her standing in the foyer surrounded by marble and moonlight and the echo of his footsteps. But this time, Serenity didn't feel defeated. She felt determined. Isabella might have been his past, but she was his present. And somehow, she was going to help him find his future, even if it killed her. Serenity discovered the hidden garden by accident. She'd been exploring the mansion's grounds, desperate to escape the suffocating tension that had settled over the house since the gala 3 days ago. Maverick had retreated completely, skipping meals and barricading himself in his study. Even Fergus seemed worried, bringing untouched trays back from the forbidden sanctuary. Following a stone path overgrown with ivy, she pushed through a gate nearly hidden by climbing roses. What she found beyond took her breath away. The secret garden was a study in melancholy beauty. Weeping willows created natural curtains around a small pond, where water lilies floated like scattered dreams. White roses climbed every available surface, their perfume heavy in the afternoon air. But it was the marble bench beneath the largest willow that made her heart stop. Fresh white roses lay across the seat, and beside them, a photograph in a silver frame. Isabella. Even in the faded photo, her beauty was ethereal. Dark hair, luminous eyes, a smile that could light up worlds. She looked young, maybe 25, caught in a moment of pure joy. And beside her in the picture, laughing with genuine happiness, was Maverick. But a different Maverick. Younger, unguarded, free from the shadows that haunted him now. You shouldn't be here. Serenity spun around to find Maverick standing at the garden entrance, his face a mask of controlled fury. But beneath the anger she saw something else, vulnerability, raw and exposed. I'm sorry. I didn't know. This is her garden. His voice was rough, broken. I built it for her. She loved white roses. Serenity's heart ached for him. She was beautiful. She was everything. Maverick moved closer, his eyes fixed on the photograph. Beautiful, brilliant, kind. She saw good in everyone, even me. He laughed bitterly, especially me. What happened, Maverick? Please. I need to understand. For a long moment he stood frozen. Then, as if a dam had burst, the words came pouring out. We were engaged for 6 months, planning the perfect wedding, the perfect life. Isabella was a pediatric surgeon. She saved children's lives while I made money. She was everything I wasn't, everything I wanted to become. His hands clenched at his sides. But I was arrogant, jealous. I couldn't stand that her work came first, that she canceled dinners for emergency surgeries, that she cared more about saving lives than attending my business functions. Serenity remained silent, sensing that interruption would shatter this fragile moment of truth. The night she died, we had a fight. A terrible fight. She'd missed our engagement party because a child had been brought in, hit by a drunk driver, critical condition. I was furious, humiliated in front of all our friends. His voice cracked. I told her she had to choose, her work or me. I gave her an ultimatum. Oh, Maverick. She looked at me like I was a stranger, said she didn't know who I'd become, that the man she'd fallen in love with would never ask her to choose between love and saving lives. Tears ran unchecked down his cheeks now. She left that night, drove to her apartment in the rain, crying because of my cruelty. A drunk driver, the same type of driver whose victim she'd just saved, ran a red light and hit her car head-on. The silence that followed was deafening. Serenity felt his pain as if it were her own, this devastating guilt he'd carried for what she could only imagine was years. She died because she was upset, because I was too selfish and insecure to see that her compassion was what made her extraordinary. He sank onto the bench beside Isabella's photograph. The child she'd saved that night survived. Grew up, graduated high school last year. I get updates sometimes. She lived because Isabella chose duty over my petty demands. And Isabella died because a drunk driver ran a red light, Serenity said firmly. Not because of you. No. His voice was hollow. She died because I drove her out into that storm, because my ego mattered more than her heart. Serenity moved to sit beside him, careful not to disturb the roses. You know what I think Isabella would say if she were here right now? Maverick looked at her with eyes full of pain. I think she'd be heartbroken that the man she loved, a man good enough to earn the love of someone so extraordinary, has spent years punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault. I think she'd want you to honor her memory by becoming the person she saw in you, not by destroying yourself with guilt. You don't understand. I understand that you lost the love of your life in the most horrible way possible. I understand that you blame yourself because blame is easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things happen to wonderful people for no reason at all. Serenity turned to face him fully. But I also understand that Isabella loved you. Really loved you. And love doesn't want the beloved to suffer forever. Maverick stared at her, something shifting in his expression. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen how you are when you forget to guard your heart. The man who built this garden, who keeps fresh roses here years later, who carries her photograph, that's not a man who destroyed love. That's a man who loved so deeply he doesn't know how to stop. For the first time since she'd known him, Maverick truly looked at her. Not through her, not past her, not around the edges of his defenses. He looked at her, seeing her completely. Who are you, Serenity Johnson? He whispered. I'm someone who believes in second chances. Someone who thinks the capacity to love deeply, even if it ends in loss, is a gift, not a curse. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and touched his face gently. Someone who sees the man Isabella fell in love with, still there beneath all the guilt and pain. He leaned into her touch like a man dying of thirst. I don't deserve. Stop. Her thumb brushed away a tear from his cheek. Stop deciding what you deserve. Start deciding what you want. What I want? His laugh was shaky. I want her back. I want to undo that night, take back every cruel word. I want... His voice broke completely. What else? Serenity pressed gently. What else do you want? Maverick's eyes met hers and she saw something new there. Not just pain, but possibility. I want to stop being afraid. Of what? Of living again. Of caring again. Of... His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. Of wanting something I have no right to want. The air between them crackled with unspoken longing. Serenity felt herself leaning closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice, the raw honesty in his eyes. Maybe, she whispered, the question isn't whether you have the right to want it. Maybe the question is whether you're brave enough to reach for it. He cupped her face in both hands, searching her eyes. You terrify me. Good. She smiled through her own tears. You terrify me too. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't for show or pretense. It was real and desperate and full of all the words he couldn't say. It tasted like possibility and hope and the beginning of healing. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Isabella's photograph caught the last rays of sunlight, as if she were smiling her blessing on this moment of new beginnings. 23 days left, Maverick murmured against Serenity's forehead. I know. I don't want you to disappear. The confession hung between them like a prayer and a promise. Then don't let me, she whispered back. The storm hit at midnight. Serenity woke to thunder crashing overhead like the world was splitting apart. Rain lashed against her windows with supernatural fury, and lightning illuminated her room in stark, terrifying flashes. She'd always hated storms, had since childhood, but this one felt different. Malevolent. She was reaching for her robe when she heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze. Somewhere in the house, Maverick was screaming. Not calling out, not shouting, screaming like a man being torn apart from the inside. Without thinking, she ran barefoot through the dark corridors following the agonized sounds to his bedroom. The door was locked, but his cries were growing more desperate, more broken. Maverick! She pounded on the door. Maverick, wake up! The screaming stopped abruptly, replaced by harsh, gasping breaths. When the door finally opened, Serenity's heart nearly stopped. Maverick stood before her in only sleep pants, his chest heaving, body slick with sweat despite the mansion's chill. But it was his eyes that terrified her. Wild, haunted, seeing something that wasn't there. Isabella? His voice was raw, confused. Isabella, is that you? No. Serenity stepped closer carefully as if approaching a wounded animal. It's Serenity. You are having a nightmare. Reality crashed over him like a wave. His shoulders sagged, and he gripped the doorframe to stay upright. God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the devastation on his face. Can I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. His bedroom was masculine and sparse, but the bed looked like a battlefield. Sheets twisted, pillows on the floor. A framed photo of Isabella sat on the nightstand, turned face down. How long have you been having them? She asked gently. Since the night she died. He ran shaking hands through his hair. Usually not this bad, but storms. He gestured helplessly at the windows where rain pelted like bullets. She died in a storm. The worst storm of the year, just like this one. Another crack of thunder made him flinch. Every time it rains like this, I'm back in that hospital room, watching them pull the sheet over her face. Serenity's heart shattered for him. Maverick, you should go back to bed. I'll be fine. No, you won't. She moved to his bed, straightening the destroyed bedding. And I'm not leaving you alone like this. Serenity, you can't. I can, and I am. She looked at him steadily. We can talk until the storm passes, or you can try to sleep and I'll stay to wake you if the nightmares come back. Your choice. He stared at her as if she were a mirage. Why would you do that? Because nobody should face their demons alone. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then his defenses crumbled completely. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Talk to me about something good. Tell me about before. Maverick hesitated, then sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. Before what? Before the guilt? Before the walls? Tell me about the man Isabella fell in love with. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He was an idiot. Thought he could conquer the world with charm and ambition. What did he love? Books, old movies, long drives with no destination. His voice softened with memory. Isabella used to say I collected experiences like other people collected stamps. Always looking for the next adventure. What was your favorite adventure? We drove to Maine one weekend. No plan, no reservations. Just threw clothes in a bag and went. Ended up in this tiny coastal town, sleeping in the car because everything was booked. Thunder rumbled, but gentler now. Isabella said it was the most romantic night of her life, watching sunrise over the ocean from the front seat of my beat-up BMW. She sounds wonderful. She was. He turned Isabella's photograph face up, studying it with infinite tenderness. She made me want to be better, not because she demanded it, but because she believed I already was. Serenity felt a stab of something uncomfortably close to jealousy, immediately followed by shame. How could she resent a dead woman who had loved him so purely? "Do you know what I think?" she said quietly. "I think she's still making you want to be better. This garden, this grief, this guilt, it's all proof that she changed you permanently. Love like that doesn't just disappear." Maverick looked at her with something like wonder. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Take my worst moments and somehow find light in them." Before she could answer, lightning crashed overhead closer than before. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into complete darkness. Maverick's sharp intake of breath told her the nightmare was threatening to return. "Hey!" She found his hand in the darkness, intertwining their fingers. "I'm here. You're safe." "I can't see her face," he whispered, panic creeping into his voice. "In the dark, I can't remember what she looked like." "Then tell me. Describe her to me." "Dark hair, like silk, brown eyes that change color in different light, sometimes amber, sometimes chocolate." His grip on her hand tightened. "She had this laugh. God, her laugh could make you believe in miracles." "She had freckles across her nose," Serenity continued, remembering the photograph. "And the most beautiful smile." "Yes." His breathing began to steady. "She used to scrunch her nose when she was concentrating, and she sang in the shower, badly but with such enthusiasm." They sat in the darkness, his memories of Isabella weaving a cocoon of warmth around them. Gradually his breathing evened out, his grip on her hand relaxed. "Serenity? What's your greatest fear?" The question caught her off guard. "Being invisible, spending my whole life as an afterthought in other people's stories." "You could never be invisible. I've spent most of my life feeling that way. Lost my parents when I was 7, raised by my grandmother who loved me but was already tired from raising her own children. Got engaged once to a man who forgot my birthday 3 years running." She laughed softly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm see-through." "You're not." His voice was fierce in the darkness. "You're the most vivid person I've ever met. You walk into a room and everything gets brighter." Her heart stopped. "Maverick, I know I have no right to say that. I know you deserve someone who isn't carrying another woman's ghost. But God help me, when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be alive." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Outside, the storm was moving away, thunder fading to distant rumbles. "The power's coming back," she whispered as lights flickered on in the hallway. But neither of them moved. They sat in his bedroom, hands clasped, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and the possibilities of their future. 22 days, he said quietly. "I know. I don't think I can let you go." "Then don't. It's not that simple. The contract is a piece of paper. This," she squeezed his hand, "is real." Like, when he kissed her this time, it was different from the garden. Desperate still, but also tender, full of promise and apology and hope. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, she saw tears on his cheeks. "I'm terrified of loving you," he whispered. "I'm terrified of you not loving me back." "Impossible." His thumb traced her cheek. "I think I've been falling since that first day, when you stood in my study and refused to be intimidated." "Good." She smiled through her own tears. "Because I've been falling too." Outside, the storm was gone, leaving behind the fresh scent of rain and new beginnings. "So this is how it ends." The voice cut through the morning sunlight streaming into the breakfast room like a blade through silk. Serenity looked up from her coffee to find a woman standing in the doorway. Elegant, predatory, with ice blue eyes and platinum hair, swept into a perfect chignon. Maverick's fork clattered against his plate. Elena. Hello, brother. Elena Stone glided into the room with the confidence of someone who owned the world. Aren't you going to introduce me to your little experiment? Brother. Serenity felt the blood drain from her face as pieces clicked into place. This was the family Maverick had never mentioned, the ties he'd severed in his self-imposed exile. Serenity. Maverick's voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. This is Elena Stone Blackwood. My sister. Elena, meet Serenity, my wife. Elena's laugh was like breaking glass. Wife? Oh, Maverick, even by your standards, this is pathetic. Did you really think a pretty face and a fake marriage would fool anyone? What do you want, Elena? Maverick stood slowly, placing himself protectively between Serenity and his sister. What I've always wanted. For you to stop this ridiculous charade and come home. The family needs you. The business needs you. Elena's eyes flicked dismissively over Serenity. This little actress has played her part well, but the show is over. She's not an actress. Isn't she? Serenity Johnson, age 26, unemployed teacher with debts totaling $43,000, signed a contract to pose as your wife for 30 days in exchange for enough money to solve all her problems. Elena smiled coldly. Did I miss anything, dear? Serenity felt the world tilt. How could Elena know the exact terms? Unless you orchestrated this. The words came out as a whisper. The job posting, the contract, it was you. Of course it was. Elena examined her manicured nails with satisfaction. My brother was wasting away in this mausoleum, drowning in guilt over a woman who's been dead for 3 years. He needed motivation to rejoin the living. Maverick's face had gone white. You used her. You used us both. I gave you exactly what you needed, someone to play house with until you remembered what it felt like to be human again. Mission accomplished. Elena turned her glacial gaze to Serenity. You've done excellent work, my dear. Truly Oscar-worthy. But your services are no longer required. We're not. Serenity struggled to find words, her heart pounding with betrayal and confusion. Oh, but you are. Did you really think this was real? That my brother, heir to a billion-dollar empire, would fall for a nobody teacher? Elena's cruelty was surgical in its precision. You were therapy, darling, nothing more. Elena, enough. Maverick's voice cracked like a whip, but the damage was done. Serenity looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth written in his stricken expression. Not that he'd known about Elena's manipulation, but that he couldn't deny it, couldn't promise it wasn't exactly what his sister claimed. How much of it was real? Serenity's voice was barely audible. All of it. Maverick reached for her, but she stepped back. Serenity, I swear to you, I didn't know she... But you can't deny what she's saying. About me being therapy. About this being temporary. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Can you? His silence was answer enough. Touching, Elena drawled. But we have business to discuss. The board meeting is in 2 hours, Maverick. Time to end this fantasy and return to reality. What board meeting? The one where they're voting on your removal as CEO. 3 years of absence have consequences, dear brother. Your little breakdown cost the company millions and the shareholders are restless. Elena's smile was victorious. Unless, of course, you're ready to resume your responsibilities. Put aside childish things and act like the man our father raised you to be. Maverick looked like he'd been struck. You're holding the company hostage. I'm saving it. And you. Elena's voice softened slightly, revealing genuine concern beneath the cruelty. This guilt is destroying you, Maverick. Isabella is dead. You're not. Stop punishing yourself and everyone around you for surviving. Serenity watched the exchange with growing understanding. Elena might be ruthless, but she was also desperate. Desperate to save her brother from himself, to bring him back to life by any means necessary, even if it meant breaking an innocent heart in the process. I need a moment with my wife, Maverick said quietly. 5 minutes. Elena checked her diamond watch. Then we leave for the city, with or without your theatrical farewell. When Elena left, the silence stretched between Maverick and Serenity like a chasm. He sat heavily in his chair, looking older than she'd ever seen him. I didn't know, he said finally. I swear to you I had no idea Elena arranged this. But you knew it was temporary. You knew this was all pretend. At first. He looked up at her with eyes full of anguish. But it stopped being pretend somewhere along the way. What we have, what I feel for you, it's real, Serenity. Is it? Or am I just convenient? A way to practice feeling human again before you go back to your real life. That's not. Your sister's right, isn't she? About the company, about your responsibilities. This was all just a vacation from reality. The pieces were falling into place now, painting a picture she didn't want to see. And now vacation's over. Maverick stood reaching for her again. I choose you. Whatever Elena threatened, whatever the company needs, I choose you. Do you? Serenity stepped back again, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. Because 13 days ago you told me I would disappear. New identity, new city, new life. You had my exit strategy planned from the beginning. That was before? Before what? Before you decided you were ready to feel again? Before I served my purpose as practice girlfriend? The tears came now, hot and angry. I won't be your stepping stone back to life, Maverick. I won't be the woman who teaches you to love again so you can go love someone else. There is no one else. There will never be anyone else. There was never supposed to be me either. She gathered the shreds of her dignity. Go to your meeting. Save your company. Live your life. Serenity, please. I'm leaving. The words came out stronger than she felt. The contract's broken anyway, right? Your sister made sure of that. She turned toward the door, every step feeling like walking through quicksand. I love you. The words stopped her cold. She turned back to find Maverick standing in the shaft of morning sunlight, looking like a man watching his world collapse for the second time. I know, she whispered. That's what makes this so much worse. She left him standing there, surrounded by the ruins of their impossible dream. But she didn't look back to see him sink to his knees, or hear the sound of his heart breaking all over again. In the foyer, Elena waited with car keys and satisfaction. Smart girl, she said as Serenity walked past. You saved yourself years of heartache. Did I? Serenity paused at the front door. Or did I just give up on the best thing that ever happened to me? Elena's perfect composure cracked slightly. Love isn't enough, dear. Trust me on that. Maybe not, Serenity said sadly. But it should be. She walked out into the morning air, leaving behind the mansion, the man, and the love that might have saved them both. Behind her, she could hear Elena calling for Maverick, demanding they leave for the city. But all Serenity could hear was the echo of 3 words that had come too late to matter. I love you. The boardroom fell silent as Maverick Stone walked through the polished doors. 24 hours had passed since Serenity left. 24 hours of Elena's satisfied smirks and urgent phone calls. 24 hours of Maverick staring at the garden where white roses bloomed for 2 women he'd loved and lost. Gentlemen, he said, taking his seat at the head of the mahogany table. Ladies, I understand you have concerns about my leadership. Richard Whitmore, the lead board member, adjusted his glasses nervously. Maverick, we're simply worried about the direction of the company. Your extended absence has created uncertainty. Uncertainty? Maverick's voice was deceptively calm. Yes, I suppose 3 years of grief would seem uncertain to shareholders. Elena, seated to his right in her power suit and predatory smile, leaned forward. What my brother means is that he's ready to fully commit to his responsibilities again. Aren't you, Maverick? All eyes turned to him. These people who had known him since before Isabella, who had watched him build an empire, who were now weighing his worth against profit margins and stock prices. I've prepared a presentation, Maverick said quietly, about the future of Stone Industries. He stood, moving to the projection screen with the same controlled grace that had once commanded respect in rooms like this around the world. But instead of charts and graphs, the screen lit up with something unexpected. A photograph of Serenity in the garden, laughing as she tried to coax a butterfly to land on her finger. The room stirred with confusion. Elena's confident expression faltered. "This," Maverick said, his voice carrying clearly through the room, "is Serenity Johnson. Some of you may know her as my contract wife, the woman my sister hired to play house with me as some elaborate form of therapy." "Maverick, what are you doing?" Elena hissed. "What I should have done 24 hours ago." He clicked to the next image, Serenity reading to children at the local library, her face glowing with genuine joy. Serenity Johnson is a teacher, was a teacher before budget cuts destroyed her school. She has a master's degree in literature, graduated summa cum laude, spent 6 years shaping young minds before the system failed her. Another click. Serenity helping elderly Mrs. Patterson from next door with her groceries, not knowing anyone was watching. She volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend, reads to patients at the children's hospital, makes dinner for her 93-year-old neighbor every Sunday. His voice softened with each revelation. She signs birthday cards for strangers at the nursing home because no one should celebrate alone. The board members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the corporate presentation they'd expected. "Maverick," Richard began. "She collects rescue cats and names them after literary characters. She cries at commercials with soldiers coming home. She makes the worst coffee in the world but drinks it anyway because her grandmother taught her the recipe." Maverick's eyes never left the screen. "She sees the best in everyone, even broken men who don't deserve her faith." Elena stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We're here to discuss business, not your personal." "Sit down, Elena." The command in Maverick's voice made his sister freeze. "You wanted me engaged with life again? Congratulations, you succeeded." He clicked to a new image, Serenity in the emerald dress from the gala, radiant beside him. "For 3 years, I've been a ghost haunting my own existence, punishing myself for surviving when Isabella didn't, convincing myself that loving again would dishonor her memory." He turned to face the room fully. "I was wrong." "Son," Richard said gently, "perhaps we should postpone this meeting." "No." Maverick's voice rang with newfound certainty. "You want to know about my fitness to lead this company? About my commitment to our future? Then listen carefully." He moved away from the screen, commanding the room with pure presence. 3 years ago, I lost the woman I planned to marry. I let guilt consume me. Let fear paralyze me. Let grief turn me into something Isabella would have been ashamed of. I abandoned my responsibilities, my family, my purpose. His gaze swept over each board member. "You have every right to question my leadership." "Then you'll step down?" Whitmore asked hopefully. "No." Maverick's smile was razor-sharp. "I'll do something much more dangerous. I'll fight for what matters." He walked to the window overlooking the city, hands clasped behind his back. Stone Industries was built on a simple principle: that business should serve life, not the other way around. We've forgotten that in recent years, haven't we? Prioritized profit over purpose, efficiency over humanity. Elena found her voice. "Maverick, you can't seriously be considering a complete restructuring?" "Absolutely." He turned back to the room, energy crackling around him like electricity. "Starting with our employee benefits package. Every worker gets full health care, including mental health services, paid family leave for all genders, on-site child care." The accountant blanched. "The cost would be astronomical. The cost of treating our people like humans instead of resources? Yes, it will be significant. It will also be profitable in the long term, because happy employees are productive employees." Maverick's eyes blazed with passion. "We're also establishing the Isabella Martinez Foundation for Pediatric Healthcare and the Eleanor Johnson Fund for Educational Initiatives." He'd named the funds after both women, Isabella, his past love, and Eleanor, Serenity's beloved grandmother. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Furthermore," he continued, I'm proposing we go public with our new direction, a company that proves you can be profitable and principled, successful and soulful. The shareholders will revolt, someone muttered. The right shareholders will invest. Maverick's smile was confident now. And the wrong ones can find another company to hollow out. Elena stared at him in shock. This isn't you. This isn't the man I raised. No, it's not. That man was selfish, driven by ego and fear. This man, he gestured to himself, was taught by a teacher that love isn't weakness, it's strength. That caring isn't liability, it's leadership. He walked back to his seat but didn't sit down. So here's my proposal. Give me 6 months to implement these changes. If our stock price falls, if our profits decline, if we become less competitive, I'll step down voluntarily and hand control to Elena. And if you succeed, Richard asked, then you'll have learned what I learned in 30 days with an extraordinary woman, that the best investment isn't in buildings or bonds or bottom lines. It's in believing that people are worth fighting for. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. All in favor of Maverick's proposal, Richard said finally. Say aye. One by one, voices rose around the table. Not unanimous, but enough. Elena slumped in her chair, defeated, but not entirely displeased. You're going to chase after her, aren't you? I'm going to find the woman I love and spend the rest of my life proving she was right to believe in me. Maverick straightened his tie with newfound purpose. Even if I have to search every library, animal shelter, and nursing home in the country. She could be anywhere by now. Then I'll look everywhere. He headed for the door, pausing only to look back at his sister. Thank you, Elena, for the manipulation, the schemes, the heartbreak. You gave me exactly what I needed. What's that? A reason to fight for love instead of running from it. He strode from the boardroom with purpose blazing in every step, leaving behind 20 years of careful corporate strategy for something infinitely more valuable. The chase of his lifetime was about to begin, and somewhere in the city, a teacher with green eyes and a wounded heart was about to discover that some fairy tales were worth rewriting. Serenity found him in the children's ward, not the other way around as fairy tales usually went. She'd been reading Charlotte's Web to the young patients at St. Mary's Hospital when she heard the familiar voice drifting from the room next door, deep, gentle, completely absorbed in bringing the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe to life for his captive audience. Her heart stopped, then started again, beating so fast she felt dizzy. It had been 2 weeks since she'd walked out of his mansion, 2 weeks of sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows, 2 weeks of telling herself she'd done the right thing. She'd moved back to her grandmother's apartment, taken a substitute teaching position, and tried to rebuild the life she'd put on hold for 30 days of impossible dreams. But every morning, she woke up reaching for him. Every evening, she caught herself listening for his footsteps. Every night she dreamed of storm blue eyes and the weight of his confession. I love you. And so, Maverick's voice continued from the next room. Aslan knew that some sacrifices are worth making for love. The irony wasn't lost on her. When the story ended and small voices called out their thanks, Serenity slipped away before he could see her. But she didn't go far, just to the hospital cafeteria, where she sat with a cup of terrible coffee and tried to make sense of the emotions warring in her chest. Excuse me, are you Serenity Johnson? She looked up to find a young nurse with kind eyes and scrubs covered in cartoon animals. Yes? Mr. Stone asked me to give you this. The nurse handed her an envelope. He said to tell you he's been reading to the children here every day for 2 weeks, hoping you'd eventually show up. Serenity's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with handwriting she'd memorized during their brief time together. Serenity, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I don't deserve your love, but I'm fighting for it regardless. You taught me that some things are worth the risk of losing everything. I resigned as CEO yesterday, gave control to Elena with instructions to implement every reform we discussed. The Isabella Martinez Foundation is funding pediatric wings in 3 hospitals. The Eleanor Johnson Fund has reopened 4 schools in underprivileged areas. But none of that matters if I can't find you. If I can't tell you that these past 2 weeks have been the longest of my life, that I'd rather spend one day loving you than a lifetime safe from heartbreak. I'm not the man I was when we met. I'm not even the man I was when you left. I'm someone new, someone you helped me become. Someone brave enough to fight for fairy tale endings. If you're reading this, it means you're still in the city, still close enough to find. I'll be in the children's garden behind the hospital every day at sunset until you're ready to see me, or until you tell me to stop waiting. I love you. Not as therapy, not as practice, not as a stepping stone to something else. I love you as the woman who saved my life by teaching me how to live it. Forever yours, if you'll have me. Maverick P.S. I've been practicing making coffee. It's still terrible, but at least now it's terrible with love. Serenity read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Through the cafeteria windows, she could see the sun beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children's garden was small but beautiful, tucked away behind the hospital like a secret. Wooden benches surrounded a playground designed for young patients, and flowering trees created natural canopies of color and shade. Maverick sat on a bench beneath a cherry tree, still in his expensive suit but somehow looking different. Younger, more open, less like a fortress and more like a man. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, hope and fear warring in his expression. You came. You've been reading to sick children. It wasn't a question. Every day. The way you did. He stood slowly as if afraid sudden movements might scare her away. They asked me to start a program. Story time with Mr. Mav, they're calling it. Mr. Mav? His smile was soft, vulnerable. The kid said Maverick was too fancy for story time. Despite everything, Serenity found herself smiling back. It suits you. They stood in the fading light, 2 people who had found and lost, and were trying to find each other again. I read your letter, she said quietly. And? You resigned. Actually resigned. Love is a better investment than power. He took a step closer. You taught me that. I taught you that business should serve life, not the other way around. You already knew about love. You just forgot for a while. I forgot about a lot of things. How to hope. How to dream. How to believe that someone could see the worst parts of me and choose to stay anyway. His voice broke slightly. I'm sorry, Serenity. For letting you think you were temporary. For not fighting harder when Elena tore us apart. For not running after you the moment you walked away. Why didn't you? Because I was still the old Maverick, the one who believed he didn't deserve good things. But these 2 weeks without you. He shook his head. I realized that whether I deserve you or not is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is whether I'm brave enough to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And are you? Ask me in 50 years. His smile was radiant, full of possibility. I'll spend every day proving it to you. Serenity felt the last of her defenses crumble. This man had dismantled his empire, restructured his life, and sat in a hospital garden every evening for 2 weeks just for the chance to see her again. If that wasn't love, she didn't know what was. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you more. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. I missed your terrible coffee and your rescue cats. I missed the way you make me want to be better than I am. I missed loving you. You never stopped. No, he agreed. I never will. When he kissed her this time, it was different from all the others. Not desperate or uncertain or full of unspoken fears. This kiss was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming. Marry me, he whispered against her lips. Really marry me. Not for a contract or a charade, but because I can't imagine a future that doesn't have you in it. We've only known each other for 37 days, I know. It's crazy and impulsive and completely illogical. His forehead touched hers. It's also the sanest thing I've ever wanted to do. Serenity laughed through her tears. You want a fairy tale ending? I want our fairy tale ending. The one where the beast learns to be a man, where love conquers fear, where 2 broken people become whole together. He pulled back to look at her seriously. What do you say, Serenity Johnson? Will you take a chance on happily ever after? She thought about all the reasons to say no. The whirlwind nature of their relationship, the complications of his world, the fact that they were still figuring out who they were together. Then she thought about the way he'd fought for her, the way he'd changed his entire life based on what she'd taught him about love and purpose. She thought about the children he read to, the foundations he'd created, the man he was becoming. Yes, she said, and watched his face light up like sunrise. Yes, I'll marry you. Really marry you. He spun her around in the garden as the first stars appeared overhead, and somewhere in the distance she could swear she heard the sound of children laughing with joy. 1 year later, the wedding was everything Elena had predicted it wouldn't be, small, intimate, and absolutely perfect. They were married in Isabella's garden, surrounded by white roses and the people who mattered most. Judge Harrison officiated, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he pronounced them husband and wife. Fergus wept openly in the front row, clutching a handkerchief embroidered with the Stone family crest. Even Elena cried, though she tried to hide it behind her designer sunglasses. Isabella would have loved her, she whispered to Maverick as they watched Serenity laugh with the children from the hospital's storytime program, their honorary wedding party. She would have, Maverick agreed, his arm around his sister's shoulders. She would have been happy that love won. The Stone Foundation, as the combined Isabella Martinez and Eleanor Johnson funds were now known, had funded 12 new schools and 6 pediatric centers in its first year. Maverick's business reforms had not only succeeded, but revolutionized the industry, with 3 competitors adopting similar employee-focused policies. But it was the small changes that mattered most to Serenity. Every morning, Maverick brought her coffee, still terrible, but improving. Every evening, they walked through the gardens, planning improvements and sharing dreams. Every night, they fell asleep in each other's arms, no longer afraid of tomorrow. Mrs. Stone, Maverick said, finding her later that evening on the terrace overlooking their gardens. You look beautiful. Mr. Mav, she teased, using the nickname the hospital children had given him. You look pretty good yourself. He pulled her close, swaying to music only they could hear. No regrets? Only one. His face fell slightly. What's that? I wish we could go back and tell that scared girl in the law office that signing that contract was the best mistake she'd ever make. Maverick's relief was palpable. And I wish I could tell that broken man in the study that love isn't the end of his story. It's the beginning. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by the scent of roses and the promise of forever, Serenity realized something profound. Fairy tales weren't about perfect people finding perfect love. They were about imperfect people choosing to be brave enough to love anyway. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to create magic. I love you, Mrs. Stone, Maverick whispered against her ear. I love you too, Mr. Stone. Forever and always. In the garden, the white roses bloomed under the moonlight, blessing this new beginning with their eternal beauty. And somewhere in the peaceful silence, 2 hearts that had found each other against impossible odds beat as one, writing the first chapter of their own, happily ever after. The end.